All right, we got 1-1 day 2. Okay, the last lesson just kind of took you through the intro in the first part of 1-1. Expect a little bit more constructing some graphs today. That's going to be a little bit of a thing. And the biggest concept you see on the list that we're going to talk through actually tends to be one of the trickier ones in Chapter 1, which is the difference between a marginal distribution and a conditional. So we'll hit that big time today. All right, let's dive right into that. Okay, you should think of like marginal and conditional as being like opposites. Okay, so when I say, hey, go ahead and make a marginal distribution, I'm saying let's break down these percents, and I kind of skipped over our context. A great one, kids and superpowers, love it. Great place to start this lesson. Think of it this way. If it's marginal, you're talking data amongst everybody. Okay? Amongst everybody. Conditions are like, all right, let's break it down and let's look at how like these percentages break down amongst just males. And then kind of compare that somehow amongst females. All right? But the percentages that you would find would not be out of everybody. If it says marginal, it's out of everybody. Okay, so if I want to get this invisibility, all right, out of all these 200 individuals that participated, who chose invisibility? Well, my table shows me 330, over 200. I kind of try to combine 30 and 200. 30 and 200 doesn't make 300, by the way. That's not the case. But notice, invisibility, 30 over everybody out of 200, or 15%. I'll show the work for one more, and then I'll just fill in the percents. Super strength. $20 out of 200. 10%. Notice the two columns about how it breaks down between males and females. Not looking at it, okay, because this is marginal. Telepathy, 22%. I think you got the idea with the proportions. So I'm not going to write out the work for the last three. Okay, and let's make a bar graph. All right, I got to be good with my space here. For invisibility, I might actually make this a little bit bigger for me. You can handle the description. The description is pretty straightforward. It's kind of like, okay, what did you see? You know, once you make the graph, that'll kind of take care of itself. For invisibility, I will put I and V. SS, super strength. Telepathy. Fly, that's short for fly. Wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. Okay. We did make a little bar graph in day 1. 15, super strength was 10. What was telepathy? 22. Pretty interesting. No real overwhelming favorite with the superpowers. Which can be a tough question. You get one superpower, one and one only, and that's what you get to pick. It's not easy. That wasn't very good. That's supposed to be a little bit shorter. I made it about the same. In fact, let's fix it. little bit shorter. Should be almost the same. Yeah, and then you could see that, it looks like the kind of the two sort of favorites were flying and freezing time. Super strength, least popular. Telepathy and invisibility were fairly close, but notice here, just one bar graph doesn't break down the conditions of gender at all. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make a conditional distribution. All right. By the way, if you ever see in your homework the reference to a two-way table, this is a two-way table. It's got totals on the right and it's got totals on the bottom. All right, so it's said to make the condition gender. All right, so now I have two different proportions that I need to do, and I'm going to compare them. Let's look at invisibility. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this for the first two, and again for the last three, then I'm just going to fill in the percents. Hopefully you've got the idea. Not 30 over 200, okay, for females, do you see where I'm getting 17 over 115? Same proportion, it's just about females though. It doesn't have to do with the males. Let's do a separate for the males. They were 13 out of 85. Now conditional distributions can be interesting because they tell you some interesting info. This comes out to be right about 15%. I'm just going to round to the nearest whole percent on these. And the males were about the same. Okay, so there wasn't really a preference in terms of the invisibility between males and females. They were both, the overall percentage we saw before was right at 15, but both males and females were right around that mark. Compare that to super strength. Of the 115 females that were surveyed, only 3 said they would prefer super strength. So some did, just not a lot. That would round to 3% to the nearest whole. Whereas with the males, 17 out of 85, that's about 20%. Okay, so there's one where you do the comparison. Again, this is conditional. Okay, and the thing again that's so important to remember is notice the number on the bottom when I'm dividing these. It's not 200. I'm using the conditions that I was given, gender. Do one distribution for females and then do a separate one for males, and you can compare them. For the sake of space and time, I'm just going to fill in the percents. Telepathy, another big difference. Way higher for females. This one's kind of interesting. Flying, quite a bit higher. Not as much as telepathy, but a bit higher for females. And then look at freezing time. Okay. Each of those two should add up to 100. If they don't, the culprit, if you will, is probably rounding. But I chose to round them to the... if I have some rounding error, or if I made a mistake rounding, it may not. All right, on the 4-step response, I'm getting way ahead of ourselves. You don't really need to dive into that quite yet. I just want you to know that they're a thing. We do a lot of longer word problems in stats, and the 4-step is kind of how we organize our work. I will make it, this one is, don't worry about that because I really just want to show you the do-step. I will make it very, very clear in class when I'm expecting that you're answering in the form of a 4-step. So in the do, that's typically where we actually do what we're setting out to, like make a bar graph. But I'm going to make one that shows these conditional distributions. It's going to look like this. I'm going to go 10, 20, 30, and 40. These are going to be as percents. Now down on the bottom, I'm going to have the same categories: invisibility, super strength, telepathy, fly, and of course, to freeze time. All right, now I need a little key here that I'm going to say that if you see an empty box, that bar is talking about females. And if you see a box that has some diagonal lines through it, that represents males. Okay, so now let's compare these. Here would be 5, 10, 5, 15, 25, and 35. For invisibility, females was right at 15%. And here I'm going to put another bar right next to it with those diagonal lines, which shows me that for invisibility, they were about the same. Super strength is where things got a little different. The female bar goes up to about 3%, whereas the male goes up to about 20. Telepathy for females was all the way up to, way up to about 34%. And then males was only about 6. Hopefully you're seeing what, this is called like a segmented bar graph. I'm hoping you're seeing what it can do as far as displaying information for a comparison between two groups. Flying was 31% for females, only about 21% for males. Freezing time, 17. And all the way up to 37 for males. Okay? So you got a couple nice slides there on the difference between marginal and conditional. All right, here's a new a new one here. Okay, I'll get you going on this. This is technically a check your understanding, so it's one you really should try on your own. But I'll get you going. Okay. So it's really similar to the marginal one that we did for the superpowers. But down here, okay, for your graph, this was about student perceptions about becoming wealthy eventually. A and C, almost no chance. I think they gave 5 categories. They could respond some chance, 50-50. Running out of room here. Good and certain. Okay, and I'll show you one of the percentages that you would want to find. It says marginal. Okay, so these are out of everybody. All right, so like for the first percentage, I would take 194 and divide it by 4,826. That would give me the percent of individuals that responded almost no chance. Comes out to be about 4%. Okay, and you would do it for the other 4, and you'd make your bar graph. I want to show you a little bit different way, because sometimes it gets a little confusing, like, oh, how, you know, do I use the conditions like of gender, or how would it look if I did the conditions of the response? We're still sticking with the context of this, you know, these younger people's perceptions of the chances that they could, you know, become wealthy someday. Now it says that we did almost certain, which we didn't. Okay, I'll add that one to it. But let's say the conditions were off of the response. Okay, what I'm getting at is how you would build a stacked bar graph like this. What you see to the left, that's just for women. Okay, but I want to show you the information that you would need. So that's a conditional one there on the left. How you would make something like this. Okay, so go to some chance. All right, the condition is now, all right, if you responded, you know, some chance, I'm going to zoom in a little closer to give myself some more space. If you said some chance, I may leave out the percentages on these and leave you out just for space, because the table here doesn't fit quite as well. But I really want to get you to how these percents are calculated. All right, so of those, 426 were female, 286 were male. Now, in all of these, you're guaranteed the percents are going to add up to 100. So this would tell me the breakdown of people that said some chance. It was like 60% female and 40% male. More females responded. Of those 712 that said some, more were females. Okay, let's go over to a good chance. Okay, now remember, the condition that I'm working on here is that they responded a good chance. Okay, so I need to go back to my table and figure out how many said that. Okay, how many said that? Well, there were 1,421. And the breakdown was, and again, all these numbers are in the table that you were given at the beginning, 663 were female, 758 for male. Almost no chance. Both of those have to be over 194, because that's how many people said that. 96 and 98. You should notice for each pair of these, every time you get 2% that add up to 100. 50-50. On the next slide, I'll finish and I'll get you what the percents are for this. We'll get organized in a table. And it says up here we did almost certain earlier. That's not true. For females, that's 486 out of 1,083. And for males, okay. And again, what this would do, if you wanted to put all this together, this is how you would make this type of stacked bar graph, right? That it would show you kind of like, oh, you could see with the red being the female that, you know, they were at a higher proportion for some chance, and then it looks like it was about 50-50 or slightly higher for the males for the other categories. All right, I just want to get organized with all this stuff because I wrote down a ton of numbers on the other page. All right, for that almost no chance, okay, that was the one that was out of 194, okay? So those percentages, Again, you're going to notice here that all of these should add up to 100. And this total right here I really don't care about. That one was about 50-50. Okay? Some chance. Some chance, but probably not. That broke down to be about 60-40. A 50-50 chance. Oh, look at that. Those responses were about 50-50. A good chance. About 47% of females said a good chance. It was about 53% of males. Almost certain of people that said that, 45% were female. About 55 were male.